Hi, it's Issie Barratt here again for the National Youth Jazz Collective, Artistic Director, having the pleasure of talking to two more fantastic musicians, their backgrounds, things they're into, just generally to get to know what it is that makes them tick and what really inspires them and excites them about music, because that's the thing that we've all got in common. It's something to do with sound that really excites us. So just to remind everybody that's watching that we will be talking for about an hour, and if you'd like to ask any questions at any point, if you could please put them in the comments on Facebook, and Nick, our producer, will message them through to me so that I can make sure they're included in the conversation. Brilliant. So today I'm thrilled to invite a very dear colleague and friend of ours who's a long-term tutor, Tom Hewson. Hi, Tom.
Hello.
See ya. And then we invited you to bring one of your collaborators, because I know how you collaborate so much, and we thought it'd be really lovely to get inside that sort of a day in the life of a working relationship. So I'm thrilled to welcome today Ruby Holland BARLI. Lovely to see you, Ruby. How you doing?
Hello. Hiya. Thanks for having me.
Really looking forward to talking to you and hearing all about the work that you both do, as well as separately. I know you're both very proactive and inspirational people, so I know the youngsters are really thrilled that you're both here. And without further ado, if it's okay with you, I'd like to first of all start off with the same question I ask everybody. The youngsters that we work with are generally up to the age of 18, and they often get quite intrigued by the older generation, wanting to know where were they and what were they doing at, up to 18 that got them into the music and writing and all that side of things. So a typical day in the life of, maybe first of all, Ruby, what do you do? What were you doing? Don't worry. What were you doing apart from climbing out of windows? What were you doing up until the age of 18? What was your formative, journey?
I went to the Brits actually, and I studied music, and I think the one thing I got out of that was just meeting new people, collaborating, networking, just suddenly being in an environment where everybody was into music and making and pushing things forward and finding their voice, finding their instrument. And I think for me, it was just finding your tribe, finding your people. Like suddenly, wow, everyone's into music, everyone's talking about music, everyone's talking about their favorite album, their favorite artist. And it's still really early days at that stage, and you're gonna change obviously over the years, but those formative initial years that you have at a music college are so important. So I went to the Brits, and then I moved down to Brighton and studied at Brighton Institute of Modern Music, which was more of the same, just hanging out with people who were just obsessed with music, which was fantastic.
I like the way that you describe finding your own tribe, because that's something that's come out. This is, I think, our 10th or 11th conversation. Something that's really keenly come out from talking to professional musicians is about that connecting with people, like-minded, kindred spirits, and just how important that is.
Yeah, definitely. You go to a normal school and there's a few people who are into music, but then you realize that you're a bit different because you just do nothing but listen to music and play music and think about it all the time. So it's really nice to just be able to focus all your time on doing that and talk to people who can encourage you to make a career out of it.
So Tom, where were you up to the age of 18? What was it that was starting you on the journey, and what inspired and motivated you?
Yeah, well, I was at a state school in Kent, and I had a sort of merry band of kind of musical misfit friends. I had a sort of, my family had a classical background, and I was doing a lot of very sort of highbrow, very serious classical piano playing, and to a point, but I knew that there was another side of what I wanted to do, and we were lucky in that there was a lot of all other music going on at the school, jazz and rock, and actually the school's quite well known for having a sort of bluegrass band, like that was quite sort of famous in the area. So it started with me, as the music teacher plonking down a kind of jazz chord sheet in front of me in a trad jazz band and saying, "Can you play anything on this?" And I had enough, I think, theory to start working stuff out. it didn't go straight from there, because I went and did a classical music degree at Oxford, like an academic music degree basically. But all the other music that wasn't featuring in my sort of formal education just was bubbling away on the side, and then yeah, I made the move, and luckily got into Trinity, where I met you, Issie, and on the jazz course there. So I kind of, yeah, I don't know whether, if it weren't for the jazz, I don't know whether I would be a musician in a different, you know, I'm not sure whether I would have ended up being a musician, because it did, you know, the other stuff, it interested me, but it never fed me as much as, and actually, you know, working with Ruby and meeting people from outside of jazz and more in the song world has also really like been hugely important for me, because that's what I actually, after my piano practice, I was up listening to singer-songwriters and rock bands and more than I was, you know, sitting down, to be honest, listening to a Brahms piano sonata in my evenings as a teenager, you know. And that music stays with you, whatever you're doing at that age. It's just indelibly written in you. You can't, you know, it always does something to you, you know.
I was wondering actually if we could evoke a bit of a sound world of what was happening. What was your sort of background sound world that was going on? What were you listening to up until the age of sort of 18? Ruby, what was happening on your?
My dad was a massive jazz head, so he was really into Miles Davis, and he loved Ray Charles, and I was introduced to some amazing singer-songwriters as well through him, like Nina Simone, Ella Fitzgerald, and but then also just from being around, you know, school and other people, also listening to sort of Oasis and just, you know, like the usual stuff that's on the radio. So I really love pop music, really love great songs. But from a really young age, I had an excellent music palette from my dad, so I was very lucky.
And was it a thing that was happening around you, your peers? Was everybody sort of quite openly listening to each other's music, whatever was on each other's iPods? Or
yeah, but it was just all about sort of just that real pop, and I didn't really know anyone at normal school who was listening to the kind of stuff that my dad would listen to. It wasn't until I got to say Brits that I was listening, that other people were saying they were listening to Ella Fitzgerald and Nina Simone or Ray Charles or anyone like that, and I think that made you just suddenly feel at home, like, okay, cool, that's really great that other people my age actually listen to these kind of people, and they fed their influences into their own music. So it was really inspiring to be around people who were kind of, you know, taking those extra special artists to heart, like I had done my whole life.
That's what we hear a lot on the summer school, actually. It's lovely to hear it in different contexts, because
yeah,
sort of 14 to 18-year-olds, when they come to the summer school, they're just relieved to have met another peer who's as passionate about the music. And it's really important that they're sharing and listening, you know, in the evenings together. It's not enough to be listening to it with an older person. It really means something that they've met someone their own age, you know, sharing that with. What about you, Tom? What were you listening to?
Well, again, I think, you know, the parent thing is so important. My dad did feed me a lot of music, and that was things, you know, I'd say actually the funny things, but the things that really first prized me away from and found and set me on path were actually kind of prog rock and things that appealed to some of the sort of classical things that I had kind of clocked, and then actually really interested me. So, you know, I remember him shoving me a lot of Frank Zappa and Yes and Todd Rundgren, and then loads of Steely Dan. Just became completely obsessed with Steely Dan, and then some classic rock, and then onto a guitar-y phase, you know, from Zappa into Steve Vai, and then into And then I remember he just bought me a CD of Bill Evans, and it was, that was a real clicking moment for me, for realizing that, because I was playing a lot of I was really into Debussy and Ravel and things, and then suddenly I thought, oh, this is all kind of coming together a bit, and that was kind of, I would say I was a late comer to appreciating great pop music, because it wasn't really part of my upbringing, actually, but completely fell in love with lots of it later on in life. But I was quite a strange, I mean, I do remember, it's a horrific moment of my teenage life, giving my first girlfriend a Frank Zappa CD.
I think that's great.
Well,
I'd love to.
I mean, it was brilliant, but I mean, you know, that was what was.
That's brilliant. At what point did you both decide, or either of you, I think I would like to be a professional musician? Ruby.
I think as soon as I was born. Like, yeah. I don't know. I can't actually remember a time when I didn't want to be a singer. Yeah. My mum was a singer, and she died when I was 3 months old. So I always had this knowledge that, you know, that's what she had done, and obviously hugely admired it because I didn't know her. And I think it just always been, oh yeah, that's what I'd like to do, and just found absolute comfort in music since day dot. So I couldn't tell you a day when I was like, oh, this is something I could be quite good at. I just always wanted to do it. So even if I wasn't very good, I would have just carried on.
What about you, Tom?
I mean, similar for me in a way, like right through my childhood, I don't think I ever would have occurred to me to do anything else. And even right through, you know, through higher education and everything, it was only the only moment where I, you know, when I was doing my actual music degree, and I just was starting to realize that what I was doing was not actually something I really believed would be the right career for me as a classical pianist or something. That was the only time when I started to doubt it, but you know, that I don't remember how exactly, but that was the only time really in my life, I think, when I doubted it. And I think that was just a really important lesson for me, and one I try and be aware of with teaching and everything, is that you just have to be, you need sometimes people to open other doors for you, and you know, you can get a bit stuck in genres and stuck in ideas as a youngster of oh, but I'm really good at this, so I think I must have to do that, when actually there's always scope to move sideways and do other things. And just because you are a really great straight ahead bebop drummer doesn't mean that you will have to do that. You know, you may end up going on tour with a rock band and loving it, and I think that's, you know, that's kind of what it's about.
So that relates to the next question that I was going to ask you both. Actually, that segued nicely in. How do you introduce yourselves when you meet somebody that doesn't know you? They ask you what you do. Ruby, what do you say?
I say, oh my God, I don't know what I say. Hi, I'm Ruby. I'm a singer-songwriter, I guess. Yeah, singer-songwriter.
And genres, do you ever commit yourself to a type of genre, or do you like to leave it open?
I feel sometimes a singer-songwriter just covers it all, because even when I'm moving to my writing, we'll just start with the basics. We'll start with you know, lyrics, melody, and the music, like just keys. So it's like, that is just a song and we're writing it. So, and then obviously the production can just go anywhere. Like if you listen to the BARLI stuff that's on Spotify, you can hear that some of it's just straight piano, and some of it's much more electronic and built up and got loads of different beautiful bits of production on it. But essentially, I always just say, I'm a singer-songwriter. Go and have a listen. Like, yeah, it's hard.
What about you, Tom? How do you introduce yourself when someone asks you what you do?
I think this question gives me a bit of a complex, to be honest with you. I mean, I honestly just say, I'm a musician, and I know that if I say that, that will be the first of many questions that I'm asked. But I don't know. I've never really worked it out. I say I'm a musician, but I'm also very nervous of saying I'm a jazz musician. So I say, but usually whatever answer I give, people are confused in some way, because if I say, because other people outside of music don't necessarily realize how diverse our careers can be. So if you try and say I'm a jazz musician, I play some contemporary jazz, and I also write and do songs and do a bit of production and teaching and compose, and they're kind of going, you know, so the straight answer is I find it very difficult. So I find that if you just say I'm a musician, sometimes, you know, that's the easiest answer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Leaves it open. Let them find out more about you gradually, rather than have to rush into it and try and pin yourself down. You know, it's nice. Like people say, I'm a writer. You know, if they write, they don't necessarily say I write short stories or poems, or I'm a journalist. It's funny how people do still want to kind of compartmentalize themselves. So it's lovely that you leave it open, that genre fluid approach.
I think it's quite old school to have people doing one thing. Whereas now I think people are quite open to the fact that your skills are transferable, and that if you are a musician, then you know it is quite likely that you might be able to teach, or you might be able to, you know, produce a bit, and you know, so this. Or if you're a writer, that you would be able to write short stories or poems, and then also lyrics if you have that way of thinking. So I think leaving it open is the best way. Yeah.
I've noticed that it's much more typical. Well, I agree with you. It's like an age era thing as well.
Yeah.
It was much when it was very prominent, you know, and predominant, people putting things in boxes over here. I did notice America was much more open and would, you know, didn't seem to worry about going from one thing to the next, being much more open. And obviously got the Indian guru system, which is, you know, it's an ongoing journey that we're all on.
Yes, definitely.
It's wonderful. So how did you both meet? How did you meet each other?
So I was signed to Columbia at the time, and I wanted to get some piano lessons because I was working with lots of different musicians and lots of different producers, and I had loads of ideas I just kind of wanted to get down for myself. And there was like this huge influx of beat makers that I was being put with, and it just made me feel very sort of stifled in not being able to get my ideas across, not be able to get the melodies to match the actual music. It wasn't emotive enough because they're very beat based, basically. So I wanted to get some piano lessons. So I met Tom and started working with him, and obviously he would play. And I think by like lesson 3, I was like, how about we just stop this and you write with me, and then I wouldn't have to track it. And it was just, his playing is so much more emotive and just so much deeper than a lot of the people that I was working with anyway. And that was more important to me than the production. There were a lot more great producers than there were great writers, if that makes sense. I think the writing was so important, and the record label I was with was putting me with a lot of, these people are really cool and trendy now, they can make a great beat. And I meant, but what about the song? And so that's how I kind of asked the universe, and Tom.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, with that in mind, to go back a little bit about when you were first starting out and how, you know, you're asking Tom, would you like to write, and being part of it. Did that come naturally to you sort of when you were in your teens? Were you being proactive like that? Or did you find you had to sort of find within yourself that sort of overcoming shyness and inviting people to work with you?
Overcoming shyness has never been a problem for me. And I've always been, you know, quite aware of what of how to go about working with really good people. So I have had some amazing collaborators in the past, and that is just part of it. You've just got to be really ballsy and just sort of see someone who you click with, you love what they do, you love how they play, they trigger something in you. That I think that's the thing that I get when I work with Tom, is that we'll just be sat with a completely blank canvas. He'll just start playing, or we'll just start chatting, and then suddenly a song will come out, and it will take just a couple of hours, and it's very natural. And that's happened with us quite a lot. So I've always been able to sort of find those people who I really want to sing about this, I really want to write about this, or this just triggers something, and it just makes the writing easy. And I think when songs come easily and naturally, they're usually the best ones. So it's just about finding those people.
Tom, how do you feel about inviting people to be part of your projects and sort of putting yourself out there? Has it been an evolving process, or did it come quite naturally?
I think I find it not so easy. At least I didn't at the beginning. If only just, which is probably just a confidence thing, and actually I probably found it easier at school and that age, because it's just a smaller, you know, when you're 18 and under, you live you're in a smaller pond, and you can get quite comfortable with the people that you know and you play with, and then you put in a new environment. And I think it's like what Ruby was saying. I think once you do it once or twice, once you ask people once or twice, would you like to do this with me? And they say yes, then it just, you know, you just need that first one or two of someone you remember, you know, someone you really respect. Would you like to come and do this gig with me? Or would you like to come? And 9 times out of 10, people will say yes and be super, super supportive. Yeah, I think that the nice thing is that Ruby in a way was just pure chance for me, which was great. It was just, you know, I was doing some other music as well, but it just came through a piano advert. And that's, you know, in a way it's great, and in a way it's kind of a shame that you think as a sort of jazz musician, and I always think this, as a young jazz musicians, how many amazing collaborations potential are there out there that are never being made because people aren't thinking or meeting in places, or you know, or just kind of slightly stuck in a channel. So it's always made me you know, it's always made me think about that, working with Ruby and working with other singers that I've met both through her and elsewhere outside of jazz world.
I get a lot of conversations when I meet with the youngsters at the summer school. You know, we have tutorials. I speak to each of them individually during the week, and it's really interesting to see some, you know, how pained some of them are about taking that next step and wanting to ask others to work with them. That, you know, and by explaining that actually the scene's very generous. It's more generous than not. People are really up for trying, like you say, finding the tribe. So somebody might say no just because it's not what they're into, but then ask the next person and their face will light up. I'm wondering, Ruby, if a young sort of 18-year-old was to come up to you, either for mentorship or even if they felt confident about a project, how do you like to be approached? What sort of approaches do you like? And what don't you like?
I'm really open. I think it's amazing that you know, if someone comes up to you, approaches you by any way, I think it's just, I'm always so encouraging. And I think if you really admire someone's work, you know, it doesn't matter how big or small they are, if you really connect with what they're doing, then go and ask them, go and say something, you know, drop them an email, you know, write to them on Instagram, anyway. You might get knocked back a few times, but the one time that you do, it could lead into something amazing. So you just have to go for it. It doesn't matter. Like, it really doesn't matter if someone doesn't reply to your message, or, you know, it just, you know, doesn't take to working with you or whatever. You just say, it's a nice thing to do, to go up to someone and say, I really like the staff. Is there any chance I could work with you? That's a compliment that you've going to brighten up someone's day, and if nothing else comes from it, then that's a nice thing. So I think just go for it.
I think also to remember that the person you're approaching was at some point in that same position themselves, building their tribe.
Yeah, exactly.
So there will be some form of at least empathy or understanding of what they're, you know, what they're asking, because they've been there themselves, hopefully, at some point.
And you never know what's going to happen when you get into a room with someone around a piano or whatever your instrument is, and just start, doesn't matter who they are, you never know what's going to happen. You could just, it's just the spark. So you always have to be open to creating that spark, otherwise you just might miss opportunities. Brilliant.
Tom, how do you feel about that side of things? What's your sort of, when you're approaching, or someone's coming to approach you, to the other way around, have you got a particular preference of how you like to be approached, or do you like to be open?
No, I think the main thing is that, a bit like what Ruby said, you know, if it's coming in from a musical place, then it's always good, and that's the thing to focus on. I think, you know, for a young musician, you've always got to remember that, you know, perspective is a funny thing, and it took me a while to realize when I was 17 that some of the people I was really idolized, when I got to know them, they were actually to themselves just at the beginning and really idolizing people above them, and you know, they would have never thought of themselves as being sort of big or above that. So I kind of think if someone's done their research and really comes to you, you know, knowing a little bit of what you've done and what you're about, and rather than just thinking, they're, you know, just in a sort of a name or a promotional sort of way. If they really understand, which I'm sure they do most of the time, then yeah, I'm always open to playing with anyone, really. It's that's I remember being on the other end of it, so I always have empathy with anyone, you know, starting out and asking.
Might we talk about that shoe on the other foot, when you talked for the first time to John Taylor and the relationship that you developed with him? Might you share a bit about that?
Yes, so the great British jazz pianist John Taylor, sadly no longer with us, was a real idol of mine. Just really knew him through records and things, and it transpired, I found out later on, I found out that my old school bus used to go past his house. I used to go past his house every day on the way to school on the bus without knowing. It was, he lived right in the next sort of village down, and I never knew that until I was after music college, and I'd written all this music which any jazz person would kind of listen to and think, oh, there's a lot of John Taylor in there. so yeah, it took me the idea of calling him up or something was so absurd to me. I couldn't bring myself to do it by myself, which in hindsight was ridiculous. But it was actually another musician, another pianist called John Turville, who said, Tom, call up John and go and see him. And I remember, so I did. And that was how we got to know John and strike up a relationship with him in the last few years of his life, which was incredibly valuable to me, and you know, just was a huge part of lots of the music that I was able to make at that time.
Is there somebody in your sort of late teens, early 20s who you met who was sort of equally important, that made that you really championed you and sort of helped you on your way?
I think when I went to Brighton Institute of Modern Music, I started having lessons with Carleen Anderson, who was in the Brand New Heavy, and I just loved her so much. She was just such an amazing energy, and she could just really sing, and just so inspiring to watch, but also so encouraging and so loving and so giving, and just a huge inspiration to me. And she just, she really took under her wing, and she was brilliant. So yeah, definitely her.
Great. Well, just to remind everyone that's watching, that the reason I keep looking down is to keep an eye on my phone to see if any questions are coming in. So don't be shy, anyone that's watching that would like to ask some questions. That's what we're here for. I know Ruby and Tom are really keen to answer anything that you'd like to know, and whatever it is, whatever the question is, nothing is too obscure, I'm sure. So both of you have referred to record deals and that side of things, and I'm wondering whether you might tell us a bit, both of you, about what it's like having a record deal and how it shapes, if it does shape, you know, your sort of artistic and endeavours and what you want to be doing. So rather than putting words into your own mouths, I think I'd like to invite you each to sort of describe your journey with and relationship with record labels. So Ruby.
Well, it has its pros and cons. I think the best advice I could give is to just have, we spoke about genres and boxes before, without sort of stifling yourself, know what you want to do, know what you're about, know what your, you know, what your deal breakers are, and establish yourself first before you, especially walking into a major label. I think I said before about being put with particular type of producers that just weren't, you know, actually bringing the best of me out, and getting really lost along the way of that, being within, having all this pressure from labels and managers and whatever else, and actually just finding my best work through a connection that I made myself. But I had been shipped all around the world, which was amazing. Sessions in LA, sessions in Stockholm, great. But going to work with these people that just didn't really work for me artistically, and that can be quite soul destroying. So I think if I was talking to my younger self, I would say, do all of the work first, know it, love it, own it, and then go into a major label machine afterwards, because you do just get pushed and pulled into different directions, and you don't really have enough sort of space to, you know, be yourself artistically, which is crazy really, but that's the nature of it.
Before I ask Tom for his journey and story, I was wondering, just to follow on from what you just said, having gone out and found, you know, what sort of partnerships with people that do facilitate, you know, your ideas, and there's a real sincere connection there. When you take that back then to the record labels, have they been open to what you've produced? Are they happy to then sort of support your ideas, or has there been a bit of a struggle with trying to get that side of things? I'm just wondering, because they're so business minded, I'm just wondering if it has been the opportunity to take your true self back in again and say, right, I'm ready now, what are we going to do?
Yeah, it has worked, and yeah, that's really rewarding, and also it makes you feel like, yeah, okay, that gives you the confidence to carry on that way. And don't get me wrong, there have been sessions that have been phenomenal that the A&R has organised and have, you know, brought out some brilliant tunes that they then pushed themselves and have gone on to do well. But then there has been situations where I've recorded something that I really didn't like, and that got really pushed and ended up being one of the most successful things I've done. But artistically, you're like, so it's actually worked in all different ways for me. But I think you, at the end of the day, you have to live with yourself and those Google searches on the stuff that you've done, and you want it to be your best work. You want to be proud of it. And I've realized that I prefer like 5 people to hear my music and me really, really be proud of it than a gazillion people to hear it and me be like, oh, don't.
That's great. Tom, can you tell us a bit about your relationship with record labels? Similar sort of story.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it's 2 ways for me, because, you know, with Ruby and others, I've kind of had a sideman into the sort of, you know, more of the major label-y poppy world. So and dealing with those dynamics of fighting, you know, of having to there's some element of fitting a brief with that, and there always is. And I think you have, if you're working with that kind of label, even if that's not what they're saying, the fact is that, you know, music labels are full of really creative people, and those people that are running those labels, they want to be creative, and they have an artistic vision themselves, and you have to, and it's similar to the question we're thinking, you know, talking the last question, it's you have to kind of take that into account with any label that you work with, that, you know, they will have an identity and a vision. And so, and that's even true of the jazz labels that I've worked with, which are obviously much smaller, but have, you know, have a history and a culture that you know, if you're going to try and work with them, you kind of got to understand a lot and try and think, yeah, I can fit in with that, even not 100%, but I can, you know, I think that sits. And I guess I was really lucky working with Cam Jazz in Italy, in that there was a pretty good musical fit with a lot of the things they were doing. And I was kind of confident that what I was bringing them was something they would like. So it wasn't, you know, that was, in a way, because in jazz it's all coming from you. You know, it's a very different process to a pop record being made, because, you know, the last one was me in a room and a piano. So, you know, if I wasn't going to start bringing in 30 vacuum cleaners, orchestra, and, you know, they knew what was going to happen, basically. Whereas you're working in the pop world, you know, our experience with big labels, small labels, is that you do a thing and you think it's great and you send it off, and then someone at that label will say, "Oh, this is brilliant. Can we send it to this person now?" And then it gets sent off to someone else. And then they say, "What am I supposed to do with this?" And they go, "Oh, I don't know, we need something on it." And then it gets sent around. And you know, you don't have that finite sort of control. And that's a special thing in a jazz environment, if you're working and producing albums, that you can have that closed system, which has some real advantages and some disadvantages, I think. But
this is the first time we've had the opportunity to talk about record labels, and I know it's such an enigma, so really thank you, for both of you, for sharing it, because I think it will give some of the youngsters a bit more confidence, as with the things that you've been saying about, you know, don't be frightened about putting yourself forward and finding your own tribe. Don't feel you've got to work with absolutely everybody. Find the people that you really resonate with. So with that in mind, it'd be wonderful to hear about your relationship and how you've been working together, and even a sort of a day in the life of, or a snapshot of how you went about writing something together. Might I hand that over to you, and either of you kick off? It'd be wonderful.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So I'll probably make Ruby laugh here. So I guess it's usually, you know, I think we've been working together for about 5 years, and it goes in cycles of, you know, an EP, and then, you know, we start writing again, and it sort of gets packaged up into little chunks and little bouts of activity. And I think we just did one very simple song together back in 2015 or 14, just with a few instruments, which was just me playing a very simple thing on an organ, and I had quite a lot of gear from I was working on a film score at the time. And so when I'd got into some gear, and then that was in the piano lessons, and we said, "Oh, let's write something," and we wrote something. And it just, yeah, it was one of those really easy songs. It was and it kind of set the tone. It was called Pebbles, and it's always yeah, I don't know, it was one of those little things that clicked, and I think it was really set. The way that we tend to work was that I would be playing something, a little loop, a little sequence, and when Ruby's in the zone, you can tell she's just kind of beavering away with all these lyrics and her very distinctive lyrical style. I would say that most of the songs have come about that way, and we've usually struggled to do it so well, actually, where we've had sort of pre-existing ideas and sending things around, and
Yeah.
that's never, we always have ideas and we're always sending each other stuff, but actually the songs that get finished and made in work have tended to happen from scratch in a room.
Yeah.
And then Ruby will sing and sing and sing and sing about 2 hours of vocals, and leave me with a session like I can go, right, that's done, and then walk up and sit and yeah, that's how, and you know, I'd say we usually would know, well, there've been lots of songs that have started and we felt really good and they never quite made it, but there's never been a song where we didn't know pretty quickly that it was working. And I think, you know, it's a lesson to learn, you know, the very beginning of something just sets you on the way. And there's a couple of songs that we wrote, probably the more successful ones, that just just have a very particular lyrical style as well, that I think Ruby has just always been really, really, really great with words and the sound of words and memorable, interesting words that still remain like relatable and intriguing, but kind of, you can grasp them, they're not totally surreal. That's always appealed to me as well. So yeah, it's I guess that's from my perspective. And Ruby, actually, there's one song that I'll always remember. Ruby, even though I'm the sort of trained musician and playing the piano, Ruby can hear amazing things that I'd never think of. And then we have this fun game where she's trying to get me to go where she's going. So there was one song we wrote called Streeters, and it has a fantastically unique harmonic thing going on in the second half of the verse that I remember Ruby singing it to me, what she was hearing, heard the vocal line. I was going, I couldn't understand what it was. And eventually I got to this very bizarre chord, what I thought was a really strange chord sequence. She was like, yes, that's what it is. And actually it was brilliant. And that was just a brilliant lesson and a great thing that I took to heart, that, you know, musical training doesn't mean that you can hear or do things that other people can't hear. It's just an access sometimes, you know. So that was a great moment that I always remember.
Ruby, did the lyrics come with the melodies, or do you do one and then the other, or?
It varies. I think a lot of the time the lyrics do come with melody, but it does. Sometimes you've just got like a really distinctive melody going round and round in your head, and then you just sit with Tom trying to work out how that's going to flow, and then you can stand at the mic and just sing the melody over and over again, and then create sort of sounds around the melody, and then create them into words. But then sometimes you'll just have a really great line, and you'll just put a melody to it, and then you build the song around that. Or Tom will be playing, a loop or a sequence, and you're like, that's amazing, and you'll build a melody from that. So it just happens in different ways. But I think the most important thing is that you both get the sound world, and you both get the vision overall of what you're making. So if you think about, I'm creating a whole body of work, because you're doing it at different times over different periods of times, like weeks, months, or whatever, you still have to sort of come back and say, okay, what is the heart and soul of this sound? And start like that, and then usually you'll come up with something that all sort of marries together.
Does it tend to be within the 2 hours, or have there been any pieces like sort of are on a slow burn where you every now and again come back to them, or do you find that most of the stuff is generated in that sort of magical 2 hours of together where the cogs start going?
It's 100% that those quick ones are the ones that stay. I've always found that. And again, if you've always got the foundations of, we know what sounds we like, we know the heart and soul of this project, then you will always be able to sort of come with it. If you overthink it, we've overplayed and overburnt so many different tracks that have just died a death but you kind of know because you're just trying to, maybe if we do this, maybe we change this, maybe if we just change the tempo, maybe if we just take this out. It's just, no, the song's dead, leave it alone, is usually the answer. So the ones that are, yeah, those 2 hours are usually the best songs that we keep.
I think that's true of people who are recording solos, you know, the same thing. The first take is normally the one who's got the magic, and we can all like you say, overthink it and rework things and try for a second take, but usually the alchemy is in the first take.
Yeah, definitely.
So where might we hear some of the things that you've written together? Is there somewhere on the internet where we might be able to hear things?
Yeah, well, it's all on Spotify. If you just search BARLI, then you will find it all on there. And there's probably a few things on SoundCloud, but yeah, Spotify is the best place to find it.
And where did you come up? What is BARLI? Where was the name? How did the name evolve? What is it for you?
How did the name evolve? I can't actually.
It's a great name.
I think I just sorted up and it just stuck.
What now within this, you know, as you sort of developing your relationship and working together and doing other projects, how do you now feel about being a side person, being in someone else's projects? What sort of projects are you doing at the moment that you think, these really set me alight, I'm very excited about this? Maybe Ruby first.
At the moment, I'm well, the last project I was working on was just before lockdown, and that was with Duran Duran, and on their new album, and they were supposed to be going on tour this year and things like that, but that's been postponed until next year, obviously because of good old Corona. And yeah, I just love being in the studio. I love like collaborating and just being with people who just love music and you know, quite spontaneous and very real and live in their recording, you know, and capturing that like real essence of actual musicianship. So yeah, that's the last project I've been working on.
If you were asked, some people have got preferences, you know, some people like to perform live, some love the studio, some can't decide between the two, they love both. Have you got a particular preference?
I just love writing so much. I do really love recording so much. It's just such a gift at the end of the day that you had nothing and then suddenly you just have this beautiful song that you will keep forever and ever and ever. That's just absolutely everything to me. But saying that, I do love getting on stage and singing as well. But yeah, I've just really fallen in love with recording and writing.
And Tom, for yourself, with you having so many different projects on the go, I'm wondering, you know, being a side person or in someone else's project, where does that sit within your current sort of activity?
Well, that's actually most of my current activity the last couple of years, which is not entirely sort of deliberate, but I just got quite a lot of projects that I was really enjoying, and had spent probably the best part of 10 years leading things, which I did enjoy. But I think, and I will do it again, but it's something you've got to throw your whole self into. And it took me a while to realize that actually I really enjoy being a bit more backroom. I love, a bit like Ruby, I'm a jazz musician, I love playing, but actually I can spend weeks in the studio. I love it. I love crafting. I love the sound, crafting sound, and like Ruby said, you know, I get very excited in the studio, and I can, you know, spend a lot of time there, and that's always been a big appeal to me. So I kind of think, yeah, I'm really happy just being with other musicians in a studio. I mean, jazz-wise, I've just been I've found a really great group of musicians that I've been playing with quite a few of their projects. It seems like a long time ago now, but it's not really. So, you know, Matt Ridley and Ant Law, and before that with Asaf Circus, and in the more of the jazz, well, the songwords, Feeney Behrman, who is brilliant and is kind of bridging is a great song thinker, teacher, writer, beautiful singer. So, you know, kind of bridging those worlds a bit. But yeah, I really enjoy it. I think I actually just really enjoy being freed from some of the responsibility of running it, which is a bit of a you know, a bit of a cop out in some ways. But you know, I think I'd be very happy doing that 70% of the time, and then I get this bug where like I really want to do this. That's just my thing. But I don't have it at the moment, actually. I don't have it right now. I probably will come back.
Ebb and flow. I'm wondering about when you go into the studio together to, once you finish a song and you record it, and then you sharing your ideas with other musicians, how do you actually impart that information? Do you write it down and give them written parts, or do you sing things to them? Do things happen? Does it go beyond the score once you're in the studio? Do you suddenly come up with more ideas to add to it? Ruby?
I let Tom do it.
Tom?
Yeah, I mean, so I think this is, and this is generally how it works, is that I think, yeah, so we've worked with other people from jazz, mostly drums, mostly Pete Ibbotson and John Blees. Both have recorded stuff for us and played live with us on gigs. But in a way, I haven't had to say all that much to them, because they're working in a lot of this, like the sound world is just very natural to them from some of their work. No, I've not really, I have scored a couple of things out for BARLI, but mostly when I was having to get other people to deprecate some of the gigs. And that was the only time. It was actually very strange sitting down and scoring out these songs. But actually, you know, it's been great, because some of the songs are quite intricate, and I was writing them all without ever notating them, and just writing them purely at the piano into Logic, you know. And then if collaborators were coming on board with bits of additional production or bass or drums or anything, then they would just send a file, you know. And for someone that comes from, like, you know, the world of notated music, it's quite liberating to work that way. And I've come to realize that actually there are some things I do much better when the notated music is not there.
Oh wow. What about when you're playing other people's music? Do you like to read notated music then, or do you open, like, you know, with Mingus, both of you kind of work with Mingus the way that you used to teach everything orally after a while? And have you got preferences, or are you open to both? Or Ruby?
I'm everything I do is definitely orally. It's not like I never had to read music at all. I've always just listened and sung it back, and I'm actually really proud of that. Really proud of that.
Yeah, but yeah, and also, yeah, I really have taken a dislike to reading things on gigs and in the studio. So yeah, the last album I made in the winter with Matt Ridley, very complex music. I made a concrete decision that I was going to learn as much of it as I could, and I did learn most of it for the session. And it's a bit squeaky bum when you're in there in a recording session without your sheet music up for something, but we put a lot of effort into it. And I definitely, for improvising and for anything, and I think I always felt like it's slightly the same with lyrics as for a singer, that I always feel like, yeah, you get a slightly different, sorry, you get a slightly different kind of performance when you're not engaging the reading reflex, and I think, you know, it can work very well. I used to be convinced I could play just as communicatively with sheet music up as I could without. Now I'm not convinced, actually. I think I play much better without music there. and I think I play more in a more aware way. And it's something I try and always, I think it's a bit of a problem in jazz. I think people, for many, many reasons, I think I'd really encourage young bands, and actually many of the really successful young bands don't read, they don't have music on stage. Really, really encourage you, if you've got the kind of music that with a bit of effort can be done without it, it looks so much better, it feels so much better. I really encourage people to write music, notate, learn the skills. It's really important. But when it comes to doing it in anger, if you can get it off, then off the page, I think it's
that
great.
ties in nicely with your work at NYJC, because everything we do at the National Youth Jazz Collective is by ear. We send Ruby, so that you know, when we do a project, we send about a month in advance. We send tracks for them to listen to, so that they do it by ear, and they're ready and they've learnt the repertoire.
Yeah.
And we can then get right inside it, like you say, rather than note bashing, and we can, you know, it's already become second nature. So
that's the thing. I think just feeling that it's such a natural thing that you've got, that you can just listen and just, you know, improvise, or, you know, just know a track. When I go into a session, if I'm doing backing vocals for anybody, you go in and it's very rare that you've even heard the track, so you're going in completely green, and by the end of the session you better have learnt it and sung it back perfectly, otherwise you're not getting paid. So yeah, it's a really important skill to have.
We've had two questions come in, and they're related actually. One is your favourite venues to perform in, and that can be either both, you know, you're playing together, and then also other projects you're doing, and then favourite recording studios as well. So maybe Ruby, might you start with your favourite venues where you enjoy?
I played this random festival at the Roundhouse once, and it was just amazing, phenomenal. And favourite studio, Abbey Road.
Nice. That's up and running again, isn't it?
I haven't seen, but yeah, that's fantastic.
Brilliant. And Tom, favourite venue, favourite studio?
Yeah, I suppose it's never been the glitziest place, but I've always felt that the Vortex has been kind of home for much of the jazz music I've made, and you know, it's a smaller scene, so we've played all over the place with pop, with more pop stuff, and sometimes some of the sort of festivals and things, you don't get an attachment to them. They look nice on Instagram or something, but you don't come back and think. Often, you know, you don't have that attachment. Whereas some of the small venues like the Vortex, we did that Roundhouse Festival together, I think.
Oh, were you there?
But I remember that, yeah. That was really early on. Yeah, that's a great venue. Studio-wise, I would say Livingston is a really nice studio. Really enjoy that. That was beautiful piano. You know, I think sometimes when you're young, studios can be a bit of a fixation, but I mean, so long as it's more about the people you're with and the engineer. And there are lots of great studios out there. But you know, if you're into gear, you'll probably have it most of the time, or not know how to use it if it's someone else's. So it's really about having a great engineer and having a great comfortable space to work in. And there's plenty of places that need support as well.
So to round off with, there's a question that I'd like to ask you, which is, because I think all three of us would agree that having a tribe and being a tribe member, as you've beautifully described it, is an intergenerational thing. And that we work with people of all different generations, and I'm thinking that there are potential tribe members out there. And so for each of your potential tribe member, that's the kindred spirit who's on that journey of developing themselves as a musician, what words of wisdom and support would you give each of them to send them on their way, and hopefully might even steer them closer to working with you in some way in the future? Ruby?
I think just echoing what I said earlier, just don't be afraid to approach people, talk about music, especially if you know that they're obviously that's their passion. People who love music and who are musicians and who are artists are always going to want to talk to you about music, you would have hoped. And I just see it as a universal language. So it's such a door opener. If you want to travel, you can go to any country and just start connecting with people because you all love music. And I just think if you think on that level, like you have some sort of secret tribe or secret sisterhood or brotherhood because you're all massive, real hardcore music lovers, then you will be less scared to connect with people and just, ask to collaborate. And yeah, anybody, all ages, all different stages in their career, just get out there and play. I mean, surely that's the nature and the essence of jazz, is the collaboration. So that's what we should be doing.
Totally. Maybe the rest of it will take care of itself as well. Don't obsess too much on the outside of the creative being together and playing. Tom?
Yeah, I obviously echo that. I think I'd like to say something a bit more specific, just to go with that as well, which is kind of today to do with what it's I think like for younger musicians a bit more today, and to an extent when I was there just starting, sort of 10 years ago with things, is that I think there's a lot of pressure now, and with and the way that the internet and social media and things enable you to do this, there's a lot of pressure to sort of put yourself out there, sell yourself, brand yourself, almost commit yourself to being a certain thing, a certain way, quite young, like quite, and you kind of have to, I think that pressure suits some people, but not everyone. And I think it's really important that you take your time, because people really develop in different ways in different times, and some musicians are made at 18 and are themselves, and some 28. And I think, like, if you just try and be comfortable with something that you're doing and really happy with something you're doing before you really give into that pressure to kind of go out and send, do 100 Instagram videos a day and get PR and do all this stuff. Just like take your time and find out the musician that you really are. Because if you commit to something that you're not actually feeling 100%, it can take a while to undo that, So I would just say, like, resist a little bit. Just be, resist a little bit some of the pressures of the modern plugged in world, if that gets ahead of what you're trying to discover yourself.
Like when we were on summer school once, I remember that they were encouraging us to get all the youngsters to tweet and go on the blogs, and we actually said no, because this is the only time they're ever going to experience a true bubble. And that bubble is so important because it's something we take with us then, and we try and emulate that in our own lives, to create our own little bubbles every now and again, so we can have that creativity. And it's really important for the youngsters to feel that. So talking of which, just to let everybody know that's watching, we're about to run the National Youth Jazz Collective Summer School, and we are going to be inviting people to come in and watch certain things that we're doing. Some of the conversations we have will be open, some of the sessions we have will be open, and various other things which will be in a newsletter that's going out in a week's time. So if you are keen to hear more about what we're doing, obviously we'll be posting it on Facebook as well, but to get that sort of the links and everything so you can join us, please do sign up for our newsletter. And then also to say that, as you can tell, we're, from all the different conversations we've had, we are very passionate, committed to supporting all young people. Anyone that's got that passion and drive and wants to meet other people, we want to facilitate that. And so obviously there are some youngsters that would really benefit from a little bit of financial support. And so we've got a very generous bursary scheme, which always needs replenishing, especially in this day and age. So if you would like to donate to the bursary scheme, please use the link that Nick, our producer, has put on the Facebook page as well. But in the meantime, I would like to thank so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's been great. I'd really like to thank you very much, Tom Hewson.
Thank you, Izzy.
And Ruby Holland. BARLI.
Thank you for having
Really
me.
lovely to talk to you both. Very much look forward to seeing you again. Good luck with everything and keep writing.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.